The lake sparkled, sunlight painting scattered diamonds across the water. A view so peaceful that Claire almost forgot why she'd come. Her leather suitcase thudded on the wide porch of Willow Cottage, her new home for the summer. It smelled of pine and polished wood inside, sunlight slanting through old glass to cast golden patterns on the dusty floorboards. She ran her hand along the faded wallpaper, remembering her realtor's words. Fixer-upper, but full of charm. A place for fresh starts, perhaps, unless the weight of her broken engagement followed her even here. After hours of unpacking, Claire explored the cottage. Behind an uneven patch of wall in the bedroom, she found a hollow spot. Curiosity flared. She pried at the seam, and with a gentle tug, the panel gave way. Inside, bundled neatly and yellowed with age, was a stack of envelopes tied with twine, at least a dozen letters. Each had a date from the 1970s, and the swirling handwriting of someone who clearly wrote with feeling. Settling in a shaft of sunlight, Claire eased open the first letter. The words tumbled out. Dearest M, the lake was wild today, and I thought of you. As she read, her pulse quickened. These were love letters, pure and aching. The writer poured his longing, frustrations, and every stolen joy into the page. But who was M? And why were the letters never sent? The next morning, Claire headed into town, letters in her bag. The old bookstore caught her eye. It was a place that looked like it remembered old secrets. She entered, and the bell tinkled above the door. Books stretched from floor to ceiling, and behind the counter stood a man, tall with tousled brown hair and guarded eyes. He looked up, offering a polite nod, but something about him seemed as cautious as she felt. Hi, she ventured. Would you happen to know anything about the history of Willow Cottage? He considered her, then said, Depends. Are you looking for ghost stories or the truth? Claire smiled, and for the first time in months, it almost felt natural. Maybe a little of both. He extended his hand. I'm Thomas. And as their fingers touched, the story of the letters and their own quietly began. Claire hesitated, the bundle of mysterious letters pressed against her chest. Thomas eyed them curiously, his gaze resting on the antique twine. Those look old, he said, his voice deep yet gentle, like the hush of turning pages. Found them at the cottage? Claire nodded, excitement and nerves tangling inside her. Do you recognize the handwriting? Or maybe the poet? Whoever wrote these was in love with someone named M. But the letters were hidden, never mailed. Thomas's face tightened imperceptibly. He motioned to a long wooden table by the window, where golden sunlight pooled across open books and fresh peonies in a chipped vase. Let me see one. With trembling fingers, Claire handed him the top envelope, watching as his eyes traced each word. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he looked up, meeting her gaze. This sounds familiar. The way they write about the water and the hills, it's almost like I've read it before. Maybe a local. She leaned forward, her heart thudding. Do you think we could find out who they were? Could we maybe search the old records or library? A hint of a smile turned up at the edge of his mouth, but his eyes stayed guarded. You want to unravel a real-life love story? Don't you? For some reason she couldn't name, Claire needed to know how it ended, for them, and maybe for herself too. After a thoughtful pause, Thomas nodded. "All right, I'll help you." There are old town logs in the back room. Few people ever bother with them. He stood, grabbing a small brass key from behind the counter. "Follow me." They squeezed down a narrow aisle between history's cast-offs, faded maps, brittle newsprint, records no one else would touch. The back room was cool, with a distinct smell of leather and dust. Thomas crouched to unlock a filing cabinet. If the letter writer lived at Willow Cottage, they'd show up in the records. "Want to read the next one out loud?" Claire perched on a stool, her voice soft. "Dearest M, you once said the lake had secrets, and I think I am one. If only you could know how every sunrise makes me miss you." The room was silent, but for her voice, the creak of wood, and, faint but unmistakable, the shift of something momentous on the horizon. She could feel it. Their search was about to wake more than old love, and maybe, just maybe, something in both their hearts as well. For much of the afternoon, Claire and Thomas combed through brittle thorns and yellowed town records. Between stacks of old property ledgers and scraps of newspaper, they pieced together fragments of Willow Cottage's past. As the sunlight waned, a gentle camaraderie grew between them, emboldened by the shared mission. "Look at this ledger," Thomas murmured, pointing to a spidery signature from 1973. "Elijah Pierce. That matches the EP on this letter. And here, see this? He transferred the deed to someone named Marianne Flynn 2 years later." "You think she could be M?" Claire's eyes sparkled. "It must be. He wrote the letters to her, but why hide them?" Thomas tilted the page toward her, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Maybe their love wasn't simple. You can feel the longing, and it's like there's something holding him back." Falling into an easy rhythm, they read aloud from the letters. Piecing together Elijah and Marianne's world, hesitant meetings by moonlight, passionate hopes for a future together, hints of a scandal that forced them apart. The words, meant only for Marianne, seemed to cast a spell over the present. As Thomas closed a heavy record book, he asked suddenly, "Why do you think you were meant to find these?" His question hung in the dim air, unexpected. Claire looked out the dusty window as dusk gathered over the lake. "Maybe I needed to believe in something again, after everything." He just nodded, understanding in his expression. There was no need for her to say more about her heartbreak. Instead, he changed the subject, lifting one of the older letters so the light caught on its delicate paper. Would you want help restoring these? I know someone who preserves old documents. We could read more, together." She smiled, warmth mingling with the thrill of discovery. "I'd love that." Before they parted, Claire tucked the letters into her bag with care. When their hands brushed, as he handed her a book about the region's poets, her cheeks flushed. He smiled, almost shy. "Same time tomorrow?" "Same time," she promised, and left the shop with a flurry in her heart. The past and the present, intertwining at the water's edge. Rain drummed softly against the windows of Willow Cottage, blurring the world outside and cocooning Claire in a gentle hush. She spent the morning sketching by the fire, her thoughts drifting to Elijah and Marianne, and Thomas, who had promised to meet her at the bookstore again that afternoon. By the time she arrived, Thomas was already waiting with 2 cups of coffee, one hand poised over a new discovery, a tattered photograph of a young couple on the cottage dock, their faces bright with secrets and joy. "I found this tucked in the back of a poetry anthology," he said, sliding it toward her. "Do you think that's them? Elijah and Marianne?" Claire traced the image, a pang of recognition in the gentle curve of the woman's smile. "If not, it should be," she whispered. "Every line in her face matches the words in those letters. She loved him, fiercely." They sat close, reading the next letter out loud. In it, Elijah confessed his fear of never being able to truly claim Marianne, of family pressures and small-town whispers that threatened to drown them. Claire's voice caught on certain lines, raw with emotion. She glanced at Thomas, surprised to see his eyes glinting, as if the story resonated somewhere deep. He broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder if loving someone is enough when everything else says you shouldn't?" Claire lowered her gaze, her memories pricking. "I used to. Now I'm not sure which is harder, loving or starting over." Thunder rolled softly as they sat in the lamplit store, lost in another time. Gradually, Claire's sadness lessened, replaced by curiosity, then hope. "Do you think Marianne stayed at Willow Cottage even after he left?" Thomas offered her a thoughtful smile. "Let's ask Mrs. Ellsworth. She grew up here, knows everyone's business, old and new. She'll talk, especially if there's pie involved." It was so simple, the invitation. But Claire's laughter rang out like music. Pie it is. As evening descended, they braved the rain, umbrella shared between them, footsteps matching along the glistening path. Together, their journey into the past was starting to kindle something new, and neither quite dared give it a name. Not yet. Mrs. Ellsworth's kitchen was perfumed with cinnamon and apples. Thomas knocked politely, and the door swung open to reveal a woman with laughing eyes and a streak of flour across her cheek. "You brought company," she mused, looking Claire up and down with a knowing smile. "Claire just moved into Willow Cottage," Thomas introduced, placing a warm pie on the counter as peace offering. Mrs. Ellsworth motioned them in. "You picked the most storied house on the lake, dear. Sit. Sit. Pie first, secrets after." As they ate, Claire revealed the cache of letters. Mrs. Ellsworth grew quiet, her spoon pausing. "Elijah and Marianne," she said finally, voice tinged with nostalgia. "It was different back then. Elijah's parents owned nearly half the lakeshore. Marianne, well, she was the gardener's daughter. No one thought it would last." "But people talk," Thomas pressed gently. "Did it?" Mrs. Ellsworth hesitated, then spoke, eyes far away. "For a while, they were wild about each other, met in secret, wrote poetry. But when Elijah's father found out, he sent Elijah away, out east somewhere. Marianne stayed, kept to herself. After a year, she packed up and vanished too." "So nobody knows what became of them?" Claire asked, disappointed. "Not for certain." Mrs. Ellsworth's smile was sad. "Some say they found each other again in another city. Others, well, I like happy endings. The lake remembers, even if people forget." As Claire and Thomas left, drizzle misting their faces, and excitement crackled between them. They weren't chasing old heartbreak. They were chasing hope. Thomas glanced over, brushing a wet strand from Claire's hair. "There's an old train ledger at the library. Might show where Marianne went. Want to look tomorrow?" Claire grinned. "Only if there's more pie." He laughed aloud, the sound echoing over the water. "Deal." For one perfect moment, Claire saw beyond her own past, into a future colored by possibility, and by the gentle, persistent hope that maybe love could begin again, even especially on the far side of heartbreak. The next morning, sunlight danced through Claire's windows, while anticipation thrummed in her veins. At the lakeside library, Thomas was already waiting on the steps. He handed her a blueberry muffin, grinning. Breakfast for detectives. Inside, the quiet was punctuated only by the hum of the librarian's desk fan and Thomas's soft tap on the thick, dust-coated ledgers. Together, they pored over aging train departures and arrivals from 40 years ago, their heads nearly touching as they deciphered each faded line. "Here, wait," Claire pointed, excitement making her voice tremble. "Marianne Flynn, 1 ticket purchased to Chicago, June 14th, 1975. "That's weeks after Elijah left," Thomas murmured, his gaze searching Claire's face. She must have followed him. Claire felt a zing of hope. So their story didn't end by the lake. Maybe they fouled their happy ending. Thomas leaned closer. "What if we could find out for sure? There's an old poetry review published in Chicago. Sometimes local poets got their work in. If Elijah kept writing, maybe his words will lead us to them." They spent hours online, paging through digital archives. Claire's heart skipped as she found a poem, "Summer's Edge" by E.P., dedicated to M.F. The verses echoed the yearning, the lake's hush, and the ache of reunion. "That's them," she breathed. He never stopped writing to her. He found her. Thomas's hand rested over hers, just for a second. "Claire, you did it. You gave them their ending." She was overcome by how much she needed that. Proof that heartbreak wasn't always the end. For a moment, silence fell, heavy and sweet, until Thomas spoke again. "Do you want to write them? The magazine still publishes letters from readers. It's a long shot, but maybe someone knows what became of them." Claire grinned, her doubts falling away. "Let's do it." As they planned their letter, shoulders touching, their laughter filled the library's hushed aisles, a quiet promise that their own new story might just be beginning, 1 page at a time. Claire's handwritten letter was gentle and honest, the kind of note that invited fate to intervene. Together, she and Thomas walked to the small postal station, slipping the envelope into the weathered blue box with a sense of reverence. On the way back, they wandered along the lake shore, words rising easily between them, as if they'd always known each other. The town felt close-knit, the breeze along the docks warm and light. "I always thought love stories ended with a goodbye," Claire admitted, as they sat on a sun-baked bench. "But Elijah and Marianne, even if we don't hear back, I want to believe they started over somewhere else." Thomas, quiet for a moment, watched a pair of swans glide across the lake. "I used to believe goodbyes lasted forever, too. My wife—" He hesitated, sadness flickering across his features. "She passed 3 years ago. I stopped hoping for second chapters. Until now." Claire covered his hand with hers, the touch light but certain. "You don't have to say more. I get it. We're both still piecing things together." He smiled, a true, grateful smile. "You're not on your own anymore, Claire." She squeezed his hand, a spark of something new, flickering and catching. They shared the silence, each moment weaving them closer. Days melted into a golden stretch of late summer. Thomas invited Claire to a lakeside poetry night. She, in turn, painted for him a watercolor of Willow Cottage, awash in twilight. A week later, the phone rang. It was the magazine. They published Claire's letter and, remarkably, Someone had responded. The call was brief but electric. An elderly woman recalled Marianne and Elijah, confirming they'd built a life together just outside Chicago. Their children still lived in the city. As Claire relayed the news to Thomas on the bookstore porch, laughter and relief mingled with a growing, unspoken affection. The past had found peace, but for Claire and Thomas, the promise of a future was suddenly, thrillingly real. The lakeside town buzzed with summer's last festival. Lanterns floated on the water, illuminating faces and stirring hope in every heart. Claire and Thomas walked shoulder to shoulder through the crowd, marveling at fireworks blooming overhead. In the gentle chaos, they found a quiet corner beneath an old willow tree. Claire's hands trembled, not with fear, but anticipation. She pulled a delicate envelope from her purse. The one addressed to her from Marianne and Elijah's daughter. With Thomas beside her, she opened it. Inside was a photograph. Elijah and Marianne in their later years, still arm in arm, beside another larger lake. They looked content, no, joyful, with grandchildren tumbling around them. There was a note, too, in a careful script. Thank you for remembering their love. My parents often said the lake where they met taught them everything about forgiveness, hope, and second chances. Keep searching for your story. Love is never really lost. Thomas nudged her gently. They really did make it because you didn't give up. Claire exhaled, her heart beating lighter. Their story feels like a gift. I never imagined moving here would give me so much more than just a place to heal. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. I don't know what comes next for us, Thomas admitted, voice low, but I'd like to find out with you. They looked up at the fireworks, colors reflected in the lake and in each other's eyes. Claire smiled, her voice steady now. I thought my story was over. Maybe what happened with us, meeting, searching, believing, it's just the beginning. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. A memorably tender moment. You're the bravest person I know, Claire. We'll write whatever comes next. Together. As the night hummed with music and laughter around them, their world felt small and vast at once. The letters had bridged decades, but it was their trust and growing affection that kindled something lasting right here, beneath the willow's gentle sweep. The first hints of autumn colored the leaves, turning the lakeshore golden as Claire found herself lingering in moments she wanted to last forever. She and Thomas had settled into an easy pattern. Morning coffees, afternoons lost to laughter and lake walks, and evenings by the fire, sharing memories both bittersweet and bright. One crisp afternoon, Thomas surprised Claire by inviting her on a rowboat trip. The lake was glassy and sunlit, the boat gliding through hush and light. I wanted to show you something special, he said, rowing them toward a shaded cove she hadn't yet discovered. Nestled on the bank was a hidden garden, overgrown but vibrant, edged with wild asters and the last blooms of summer roses. I used to come here with Anna, Thomas confessed quietly. For so long, this place was filled only with loss. Claire rested her hand over his, grateful for his vulnerability. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with me. Thomas squeezed her hand, and for a long moment they simply watched the water, comforted by the tranquility and by each other. "It's not just a place for the past," he said at last. "I want to create new memories here, with you, if you'll let me." Emotions brimmed in Claire's chest. "I'd like that, more than anything." Back at the cottage that night, letters, photos, and their own story spread across the table. Claire hesitated over a blank sheet of paper. What if I wrote our story? She wondered aloud. Not just the letter's mystery, but everything since. The healing, the hope. Someone else might need to know it's possible to start again. Thomas joined her, his presence a steady anchor. "Let's write it together, both of our voices, side by side." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Claire truly believed in the promise of tomorrow. Yet, even as contentment settled over them, uncertainty lingered. Would their own story withstand the test of time the way Elijah and Marianne's had? The answer, she realized, was in every choice they made, starting now, with pen to paper and hearts open to the future. As the wind whispered through the trees outside, Claire and Thomas began drafting the first words of their shared story, not knowing exactly where it would lead, but ready together to find out. The lake shimmered with the gentle promise of a new day. Mist rising as Claire stood at the cottage's porch, a steaming mug warming her hands. Inside, the table was scattered with drafts, pages written by her, by Thomas, and by both. They had started shaping the story of Willow Cottage and all it had come to mean. The past and present blended as seamlessly as two lines of a poem. Thomas emerged, hair tousled, newspapers tucked beneath his arm. He studied her for a moment, quiet affection in every glance. "I think you're braver than you know," he said softly. "Sharing your pain, letting someone in again, that takes more courage than starting fresh." Claire smiled, feeling that truth bloom inside her. There'd been days, not so long ago, when she doubted her heart would ever mend. Yet now, she had the steady comfort of his love and friendship, the joy of their shared purpose, and hope for every chapter ahead. As the morning unfolded, they worked side by side, weaving not just Elijah and Marianne's story, but their own. Stories of loss, hope, and small victories that stitched their lives together. The first time Claire wrote the words, "Our story," her voice quivered with emotion. Finishing the final pages, Thomas paused to look across at her. "Do you ever think about sending this to the magazine? The one where we found Marianne and Elijah's ending? So others might believe in new beginnings too?" Claire nodded, her eyes bright. "After all we've uncovered, I want someone to know that starting again is possible. That healing doesn't erase loss, it makes space for something new." Together they bundled the manuscript. As they slid the envelope into the mailbox, snow flurries began to drift from the sky, frosting the lake's edge, each flake a whisper of things yet to come. Back inside, the fireside glowed. Thomas reached for Claire. "Are you ready for whatever comes next?" She tucked herself beneath his arm, content. "With you, I am." The lake outside was silent and still, but inside Willow Cottage, laughter filled the air. Proof that new stories, once begun, could bloom across seasons, just as the lake had always known. Because love, real, resilient, and hard-won, never truly ended. It merely began again, wherever it was bravest to start.